The following program is being brought to you in part by
Community Health Net Health Centers. Rooted in the communities of Northwest Indiana, Community Health Net Health Centers offer family practice, pediatrics, behavioral health, OBGYN, eye care, and dental. Community Health Net Health Centers provides compassionate health care for all.
Good evening and welcome to the LRP Tower. My name is Don Clark. We are here with our second round of doctors that we do every Wednesday, and we're great to have Dr. Seabrook available to help us out with some information. Some of that information we do like to carry over into our next show from time to time, but we've got a busy half hour that we have to deal with here. So welcome to A Higher Calling. And Dr. Glenn Harrison. Doctor, good evening.
Good evening, Don. How you doing today, bud?
We're doing good. We had to make a couple of adjustments here. We've got I've got a little procedure that I'm having done tomorrow. So I had my COVID test on Monday.
Okay.
And we got done with the test, and then they said, "Okay, now go home."
Right.
And I'm like, "What? Right? What?"
Right.
And
Yeah.
they said,
Go
"Yeah,
home.
you are now quarantined until Thursday." So it's like, okay,
Right.
that's good and bad, but at least right before we get into all the fun part of this, at least we've got a couple of doctors that I'm dealing with, and in case anything goes wrong, I'm just a Zoom call away. So
You can get a plethora of information. Yes.
absolutely,
That's
absolutely. Right. So Dr. Harrison, we want to get into our topic for this week. And the way that everything has been going so far with the show, we've received some wonderful compliments on what you have done, the information that you provided. And we do have also some people that are checking in from time to time with some other ideas that they have. So we'll touch base on that as we go along. But I'm kind of looking at what we've been talking about, the way the show has been set up to go. And we're looking at places of cannabis and current medicine. And we're just going to let you do a little introduction into that, sir.
Okay. Let me say, this, for me, it's all about the plant. And the plant gives you so many different directions, like a tree arborizes and can give you so many different limbs and so many different leaves. And we wanted to talk today primarily about how cannabis can be utilized in medicine, in current medicine today. And we're really it's kind of schizophrenic, to be perfectly honest with you, because in one instance, the federal government classifies cannabis as a Schedule 1. That means it has no medicinal value. But going through the pandemic, the only thing that was open in many instances were either the liquor store or the dispensary. They called it an essential good, and mostly for the medical component. So is it a medicine or is it not a medicine? If it is a medicine, then what are its properties and why is it helpful? It can be helpful in a number of different entities. Let's look at COVID. COVID has been the subject, and cannabis has been the subject of a number of articles in the short order. One that was published actually in Forbes magazine last week. And they were looking at cannabis and could it help as far as COVID inflammation is concerned. And we know that COVID is a virus that gives you what you call an ARDS syndrome. It's not a pneumonia, not a localized process, but a disseminated process that we think comes from your immune system, a disactivation of your immune system. So it's like girls gone wild. You gotta slow them down a little bit because they're running wild all over the place. But the way that we normally do that in medicine is with some type of immune modulator. And if you look at COVID as far as an entity and therapeutics, the first thing that we looked at, honestly, and that caused the most controversy, was an immunomodulator called hydroxychloroquine. Now, hydroxychloroquine is usually used for malaria, but you can also use it for lupus and other arthritides. So it has an effect on the immune system. It slows it down a little bit. We have other models where we use immune modulating drugs, especially in the lungs, especially for people with asthma, because asthma, we believe, is an immune mediated disease. You come in contact with an allergen, your lungs close up, use an inhaler. What kind of drug do you use in order to stay out of trouble on a chronic basis? An immune modulator, either dexamethasone or benesamide. Those are inhalers that give you a steroid into your lungs, which keeps everything cool as far as the immune system is concerned. It's actually a blanket or one that suppresses the immune system as much as possible so it doesn't get out of control. But we also know that cannabis does the same thing. And not only does cannabis do the same thing, but it's also antiviral. So you can see where it might play in this particular illness. And we're going to need to look at it. The problem with cannabis is it's hard to evaluate. It's hard to evaluate because there's so many different strains, and people not only use it for medicine, but they use it for recreation. So it'd be hard to do studies on patients in cannabis and COVID, principally because there's nobody there to fund it.
Is there when you talk about to be able to use this for COVID, and you mentioned that it was that the dispensaries were open during at the beginning of the COVID. Are there still some doctors that are having problems differentiating between marijuana and how it works and how to use it under this circumstance for COVID? Or is the medical community going along with it a little bit more and agreeing with it a little bit more?
Well, they're not going to agree to it because principally there are no studies done. And for any doctor to agree to anything or suggest anything, it really needs to meet the scientific protocol. Has it undergone the rigor of study that we use with every drug in order to place our professional recommendations on it? That's why it costs so much to get a drug through the FDA, because it has to go through so many different steps and so many different studies. But as far as the mindset of medical practitioners, everything that I've seen so far leads towards doctors becoming more and more amenable as far as using cannabis in an off-label kind of uses. Would they recommend it? No. Not necessarily, because they can't write a script for it. It's a class 1 drug. And in many instances, because we had no training and really have even less experience with the plant, it's very hard for them to make those kinds of recommendations. I haven't met a lot of my colleagues that understand the real tempo and tenor of cannabis therapy of yet, but that's the reason why we're doing this, to try to open up the spectrum a little bit.
There was some information that you had sent over to me last week regarding the University of Nebraska and also Texas Biomedical Research Institute, where they're trying to move forward with the research on how this can be used on a grander scale to help with COVID. Are there more research facilities getting involved with that, or is it a very limited area right now?
If you look in the last few years, just as far as cannabis and looking at either viral illnesses or this particular illness, COVID, there are a number of studies. There were some studies actually, I think it was 2 years ago, out of Mount Sinai and also out of LSU. But they were most notably looking at cannabis as an antiviral. And they were playing up on the work that really was pioneered by Tashkin and all those other studies in regards to HIV, because we found that cannabis ameliorates or slows down the process in regards to HIV, probably on a dual track. Because in one instance, it slows down the replication of viral particles, and in the other instance, it slows down concomitant inflammation that would occur with any type of infection. So the number of studies is widening out considerably, and we're looking, if you look at all of the processes that we utilize as providers to write a certification for a patient right now, typically they fall along a couple of lines. Pulmonary is not so much. As much as neurologic illnesses, whether it's Alzheimer's or Lou Gehrig's disease or myasthenia gravis or MS or autism or any type of neuropathy. We can use cannabis and with anecdotal evidence that it is efficacious. As far as the lung and pulmonary entities, that's another story. But that's what's coming, because the principles of cannabis are, number one, it's not toxic. Number two, it's anti-inflammatory. And number three, it has a wide volume of distribution. What does that mean? That means that it's effective, that it won't hurt you, and it'll do the job.
Okay. This is the LRP Network. We're with Dr. Glenn Harrison. He is the Samurai Doc, and we are very glad to have him in here once a week to be able to get a higher calling and to get some more information, especially in these times. Things have changed a lot in the past week since we've met. We've got a number of reports that are on the rise. We've got a number of numbers that are on the rise. And to go into the anxiety level of where so many people are today. So to kind of break away for a little bit about the medicinal purposes and more along the lines of a mental health boost that you would need from this. Is there a specific strain, I guess, that you would look for something that would be a little more calmer than most to get you through something like this?
Got you. Now, everybody is going to have their own particular strains that they respond to, that they gravitate to. But I would say in these days, given the amount of anxiety and the out-and-out craziness, remember, we're in Chicago. There's craziness at all levels here.
Yes.
And if you go out on the streets, you'll see it. I mean, you will decidedly see it. As far as recommendations for cannabis, it would depend upon two things. Number one, how naive are you to utilizing cannabis? If you haven't had exposure before, I'm damn sure not going to put you in with a high THC aliquot. I'm going to start you at something lower. And if anxiety is principally your issue, because cannabis is probably better for anxiety than it is for depression, then I'm going to make sure that you have some aliquot of CBD from the plant. It has to have that as a signature. Why? Because we've known for a long time that if you utilize high-grade sativas, you can get a little paranoid. You know what I mean? You can start looking over your shoulder, start getting a little anxious. And the way you typically cut that is with an anxiolytic, and CBD is a tremendous anxiolytic. Even if you used it as what we call an isolate, it would probably be effective. But in most instances, it's better as an integral part of the melody. You know, The drums doing their thing, the bass doing their thing, the horns doing their thing. That's the plant, because the plant will give you THC, CBD, other cannabinoids, and terpenes. It's multiple levels, and all of them have an effect. So yes, if I was going to start you on anything, I'd probably start you on a hybrid with a low THC aliquot just for anxiety. And then the real question would be, what type of preparation? I'd want to have some. I wouldn't give you a brownie. That'll take all day to get there. And if you have anxiety, you need alleviation pretty quickly. And there are multiple ways of doing that, but it all really depends upon the person, what's their experience, and what they're looking to do.
I definitely want to get back to the positives and negatives and how this is working with COVID and the different areas that it's working with. But you bring up a really good point. There's a number of people that are not, the uncertainty of how to deal with going to a dispensary or talking to a doctor about the medical ramifications of using marijuana. A number of people that I've spoke to that asked them, have you been to a dispensary yet? And the reason that they haven't is because they're not comfortable, and they're not, because they haven't been to one, they don't know what to expect. And I said, I think that you will be pleasantly surprised and pleased when you get there that the people that are working there are extremely knowledgeable about what they have to do. This isn't like going down around the block when you used to buy it from a neighbor. These people know what they're talking about. Trust me, if you have, and bring your questions, because they will have answers for you.
Yes. And customer service is their job. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're supposed to provide information on their product. Now, their product, though, is all over the place, a plethora. I mean, you have it all. And when I counsel my patients, I tell them, it'll be like The Simpsons, because it can overwhelm you. There's just so much there. So the first thing I tell them is put your hand on your wallet.
Yes.
All right. And go nice and slow. And we generally talk about different strains and what they're used for, and we give them some categories so that they can look. But it's an individual adventure for everyone that I've spoken to, because they have to achieve a energy of activation to hurdle over those barriers. And those barriers are all stigma and reputation generally. Because once again, I mean, most people I talked to tried it in high school and walked away from it and thought of it as a nice little party drug, but never ever thought of it as a particular medicine. Well, now it's a medicine, and it's a very effective medicine for a number of debilitating conditions.
And now that we're looking at how it's being used for COVID, are the side effects for using it for COVID, are they minimal?
For cannabis?
Yes.
The side effects for cannabis are always the same. Hungry, happy, sleepy. Okay. And dry mouth and dry eyes in many instances, but other than that, and some variation of that, depending on the dose that you're taking, but other than that, it's very well tolerated. That was one thing that was most notable from the early study. I think it was 2006, that Tashkin did his study at UCLA, and he looked at chronic smokers and their degree of lung disease, and basically he found that chronic cannabis smokers had a lower incidence of a disease, obviously, than smokers, tobacco smokers, and just a statistically smaller degree or incidence than non-smokers, which was decidedly interesting. Is there a protective effect? And from that, now we move forward to COVID and how it might be useful in an ARDS type pattern where you need immunomodulation. Cannabis isn't an immunosuppressant, it's an immunomodulator. It slows it down, almost like Jordan slowed down when he was in the zone. He slowed down in his own mind. Everything opened up. Everything was much, much easier to do. That's the effect on the nervous system and on other systems, because this is a neurohormonal agent, and it modulates your immune system and your other systems. Even having sex is modulated by endocannabinoids. So it plays at a central point in all of our body functions, our bodily functions, and even as far as pulmonary pathology.
It sounds to me that when the dispensaries were put together and the medical marijuana was put into use, that the the research that was done on it was done extremely carefully, very, very close to working with the scientists on it to make sure that it was done properly, not to let it go into an area. You talk about the differences between smoking marijuana and then smoking cigarettes, and you really don't know what's in that cigarette, but you're pretty sure what's in that marijuana. And thank God for that, because they were able to do it properly and to do it scientifically.
But those studies principally were done after a whole bunch of studies were done all throughout time. Even in the 1950s, you had the LaGuardia Commission out in New York that was looking at the cannabis laws, and they are really kind of the bedrock of studies moving forward. I mean, they're there. You can refer back to them, and you see a clear and consistent pattern as far as the plant, its usage, and its pathology. And really, there hasn't. When I say in 5,000 years we haven't killed anybody, I'm saying that for real. That is the case. The real issues are not notably with the plant, but what the plant has been treated with. If you were smoking weed that was doused in paraquat, you were going to have some issues. And there was some question about forming pulmonary blebs or pneumoconiosis. In those instances, I think that it was much more associated with what the plant was doused with than necessarily the plant, because they haven't been consistent as far as findings across time.
Has all of the different ways that marijuana and cannabis can be used for different ailments, as the experimentation obviously is continuing, it's ongoing, but when we talk about side effects, knowing that those are the side effects that we know that going in, nothing else has been found. I would think that as we continue to progress, the medical community will continue to embrace the different areas where the testing is being done, if that makes sense.
We haven't even scratched the surface. The biggest issue in clinical medicine right now is probably the lack of effective antibiotics. The bacteria have gotten smarter than we are. Why? Because we treat all of our animals with antibiotics in order to create a greater yield, and that ubiquitous use has led to widespread resistance as far as antibiotics are concerned. And so with that, you go into the hospital and there are a number of bugs that just laugh at the antibiotics. One notably is called methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. It's a bad bug. You get it in the hospital, you're going to have issues. Well, cannabis has an antibiotic function that is not resisted by MRSA. It kills MRSA. And we haven't studied it enough as far as an antibiotic. Is antiviral? Is antibiotic? Is it antifungal too? There's only one other natural product that we know of that has that trifecta: honey. Okay. So we keep seeing this pattern in the natural plant world in as far as health, with both honey and cannabis, that they can help us as far as our battle with the bugs. And that, I think, will be the next step.
Gotcha. We focused primarily this week on how it will work with COVID, and we barely scratched the surface on that, because with where they're going with the reports that are coming in each and every week, and the age groups that are being affected each and every week, that is making it different. The one thing that we do know for sure is that COVID really is an equal opportunity offender.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what age. It doesn't matter. Yes. There are some degrees of difference between different races, but for the most part, it does not blindly go through its course. It will target everybody in some way, shape, or form.
But it will target some people worse. And for those people we know are at higher risk, it would better to be able to prophylax them, much like an asthmatic. So if you had an inhaler with a cannabinoid, and you could do it twice a day to keep your lungs fresh as you go through this pandemic, that might be a strategy that we can employ, especially in nursing homes and with other patients that are at risk. So we're going to have to look at this in a number of different ways. A vaccine, that's off here on the side. What else do we do with therapeutics? And that's where cannabis comes into play.
I think that's a very wise statement that you made, to be able to, because they keep they keep saying the words, we're going to rush through a vaccine, which I think is, in a case like this, is very, very dangerous. And I'm not a doctor, but I play one on the radio. So I thank you. This time always goes by very, very quickly, but it's very informational. It's very educational. And I look forward to our meetings each and every week. And I know that further on down the road, we'll be able to do some more of these programs as we move forward, because you have a lot of information that needs to come out, and we really appreciate your time.
I love spending time with you.
This is great. Dr. Glenn Harrison, the Samurai Doc, and a higher calling. We look forward to it each and every week. You stay happy and healthy, and we'll talk to you next week.
Peace and hair grease.
My name is Don Clark. This is the LRP Network. Thank you for watching.
The Samurai Doc was brought to you in part by
Health Net Health Centers, rooted in the communities of Northwest Indiana. Community Health Net Health Centers offer family practice, pediatrics, behavioral health, OBGYN, eye care, and dental. Community Health Net Health Centers provides compassionate health care for all.